fact, I cannot wait for the day that I hire a CEO. I am completely removed from the business apart from 2 tasks which I love. And a good friend gave me a bit of a nudge. He said, "What would you do?" And I said, "I'd be a communication coach, social dynamics coach." This is a dream that many people had before COVID especially. And one of the blessings of COVID was people realized,
In general, I think it's going to be a lot more remote, decentralized, and more free, independent, fun. Hey, what is up, everyone? Welcome back to OpsTalk. I am your host, Martin Mazay, and today we have an awesome guest that I'm very excited to speak to. His name is Shako Lokman. Shako is an executive communications coach, and he has amassed over 300,000 followers on Instagram. His content got over 14 million views, and he has coached hundreds of clients on their communication skills so they can master their executive presence as professionals. He's based in Dubai, and his business is doing this with a fully remote team of 8 team members. So I'm excited to dive into this. Shako, welcome to the podcast, man.
Thanks for having me, Martin. Good to see you, brother.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, man. So before we jump into everything business and operations, I would love for you to tell our audience a little bit about your journey. How did you become an executive communications coach?
So I know the way that we became friends initially was through the world of personal development and coaching. And when I grew up, I was very socially awkward. And I think that was partly because growing up in Australia as an immigrant, before my parents bought a house, we were constantly moving around the city of Sydney. That meant going to different schools, trying to make new friends. So I never really developed the skills to integrate into a social circle. So that led to social anxiety and social awkwardness all throughout high school, even my early years, actually, I would say the entirety of university, to the point where anytime I was in a group setting, I would be overthinking, I would be very reserved and just feeling deeply insecure, not feeling good enough. It got so bad to the point where any job I had after uni and during uni as well, I would either get fired or just do horribly because of my inability to communicate. While I was at university though, in my, I think it was 3rd year, I came across the world of personal development through Robert Greene, The 48 Laws of Power. That was my introduction to personal development, especially in the avenue of communication skills. It was at that moment where I saw the information and it blew my mind, because you probably had this realization at some point as well. My realization was, oh my God, there's actually information out there that teaches you how to be more confident, that teaches you how to be a better version of yourself. So long story short, I became obsessed. I dropped out of uni. I went into sales. I was so obsessed with understanding human nature and social dynamics, where I grew rapidly from that obsession, from that utmost curiosity. And I ended up finding some mentors in real life and online as well. Totally transformed my communication skills, especially in regards to my self-esteem and confidence, to the point where I ended up getting promoted in every career that I had after that. Getting headhunted by a company in Sydney. It was a construction/compliance company, was an accounts manager, had a great job, great income, great social circle. And COVID hit. I was still in the job. It was still secure, but I started to feel really bored. And at that point, I asked myself, if I could do anything, what would I do? And a good friend gave me a bit of a nudge. He said, "What would you do?" And I said, "I'd be a communication coach, social dynamics coach." He said, "What's stopping you?" I said, "I don't know. How do you do that? Don't I need to go study psychology, go back to uni?" He said, "No, you can be just a coach because you have the experience, you have the knowledge, and you have the passion." So that's when I started Mind's Eye Status, my communication coaching company. And ever since then, 6 years ago, haven't stopped. And it's been up and up, thank God. It's been incredible.
I absolutely love your story, and we definitely have that in common. I think we both got into the world of business through self-development first, right? So we started with, how can I optimize myself? How can I change? How can I grow? And that eventually somehow bleeds into your career, your business. And what I think is really interesting now that I work in recruiting, right? And you run your team, I think those skills of working on yourself and communication and growing as a person is really connected to actually running a business, because a business is really just a collection of people, right? Like every business is just a group of people, right? And I'm curious how that has helped you with, running your team and And yeah, what sort of unique perspectives does that give you when being a leader in your own organization?
It's a really good point because the reason why I chose communication skills as my specialty, as my area of expertise, is because, as you allude to, it impacts your career, it impacts your business. No matter what job you have, you're going to be communicating one way or another. Therefore, it's the most important skill you can have. That's my belief. And if it wasn't for my communication skills, I wouldn't be able to, first of all, make the content that I do, reach my ideal clients. I wouldn't attract my ideal clients through conversations and consulting and sales calls, build up enough trust, authority through authenticity as well, because people can feel that. And I wouldn't be able to manage the team that I have now. And since I've hired, I would say the majority of my staff, they've all been very, very loyal to me. And that's because of the communication and leadership skills that I've developed. So it impacts everything. It builds that trust, and it not only benefits you in business, but it just makes it more enjoyable, man. When I have team meetings, when I text my assistant or our manager, for example, it almost feels like I'm just texting a friend. Of course, there's that professionalism there, but as cheesy and cliche as it sounds, when you do master communication, you end up not working a day in your life because it doesn't take that effort, which exhausts most people, especially if they're stuck in a 9 to 5 or in a business that they hate. It feels exhausting. So it adds that level of flow and efficiency.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that a lot of people get wrong when hiring remote. You know, the businesses that I've been involved in, you've been in, working remote is almost like a default. To a lot of people, it's something new, or it's not something new, but they've kind of settled for thinking, oh, if I'm working with someone offshore, near shore, then that means there's going to be this massive cultural gap. There's going to be this massive language barrier. They're just not going to get it. You know, the communication from like effortless, I'm talking to a friend and we're working on this exciting thing together. We're working on this business together. That's awesome. I feel lit up by that every day. You go to this, oof, I have this VA that I have to like crack the whip over every day and I have to micromanage, and they say they got it when they didn't get it, and they said they're going to deliver it and they don't deliver it, that sort of thing. I think a lot of people get stuck with that and they don't understand that, like, hey, you can have remote talent, different countries from different cultures, and you can still be completely aligned and you can still have a great time running that business.
Absolutely. And one of my philosophies for business, especially the internal operations side of business with a team, is it should be fun. I'm of the belief, even before I started my business, when I would go into work, when I was a real estate agent, when I was an accounts manager, when I was a pharmacy assistant, I was the one who was laughing and smiling the most in every job that I had. Not because I was faking it, but because I'm a playful guy. I have a great, I'm not going to say I have a great sense of humor. I think I do, but I do have a sense of humor. Thank you, bro. I do have a sense of humor. So I allow that to come out. You don't have to. I've worked with people in the past, not in this business when I was an employee. They would come into work and they just looked miserable every day. You couldn't crack a joke with them. And I always couldn't fathom why somebody would put themselves in that position. So when we hire somebody, even on the interview process, of course I'm professional, but I do kind of have that playful edge about me just to see how they react. Because if somebody's super uptight, I don't know if I can work with them. I won't be able to work with them. But when they are in the business, we make fun of each other. My employees, for example, they're from, I think, 5 or 6 different countries altogether. Yeah, so we are global, man. And with that comes cultural differences. For example, I live in Dubai, right? And I'm a Muslim. I wear the kandora, you know, like the gown thing that Muslim men wear. I wear that on Fridays because Friday is our Jummah daily, our weekly prayer where we all congregate at the mosque. When I come back from the mosque, I have my calls, client calls, sales calls, and team meetings wearing that. And sometimes they might question it. And I tell them, oh yeah, I just went to the mosque, and they accept it. And we accept those differences as well. We even make fun of each other sometimes. So it should be fun.
Like, why did you come on this call wearing your pajamas? You're supposed to be the CEO, that sort of thing?
Something like that. Exactly.
I hear you, man. That's awesome. Yeah. What are the different countries that you have team members from right now?
Let's see. We have Philippines, we have Australia, we have England, we have Slovenia, we have Denmark, we have Dubai, we have India. I think that's it. We have
Amazing.
7 countries.
So cool, man. That's awesome. Yeah, just as a quick note on the whole uptight corporate business vibe, we know each other from the coaching industry, self-development industry, as we said. And one of the reasons I got into that business back in the day is because I'd been traumatized by that sort of stuck up corporate vibe. I've worked at a few businesses that didn't have it and then others that had it. And I was like, man, I cannot run like an old school business, right? I need to be in something more open, more fun. And then now that my career has taken me down different paths, I actually understood that there are businesses out there in every industry. Like it might be like an accounting business. It might be a tailor, right? It might be a construction business, whatever it is. There'll be people out there who are not uptight, that are just more fun to talk to. And like business can be fun. And of course, you always got to keep, certain guidelines, right? And what's really important for me that I learned, for example, is whatever's happening, however friendly you are with the other party, whether that's an employee or a contractor or a client, you always got to have agreements in writing. That's one of like my rules of thumb. Like, some people would consider that basic, but that's one of the only dangers of being so
I
buddy
agree.
with everyone,
I
right? Is
completely
that
agree.
so that you have this agreement that you had on a call, you don't have it in writing, or you have it in an email and it's not completely clear. No, you gotta have a written agreement. Beyond written agreements, in every industry, there are cool people and cool businesses to work with, and you don't have to be uptight and you don't have to play the corporate game unless you want to, which is always an option.
Yeah.
But what I'm really curious about, you mentioned that you look for that vibe. You mentioned that you look for a good sense of humor. And I'm very curious, like, what are the other qualities you look for when you're hiring?
Yeah. So good sense of humor and good vibe are pretty low on the priority list when hiring. Let me make that clear. They're pretty low on the priority list. First is skill and experience. Sometimes experience isn't even necessary. For example, if I have somebody who wants to be an assistant, they've never been an assistant for a coach before, but they have skill and they have a great attitude and they're intelligent. Intelligence is absolutely a trait that I look for. Somebody needs to be not only mentally and critically intelligent, but emotionally and socially intelligent. If somebody, for example, I'll tell you one mini horror story, a mini one.
Yeah.
During an interview, I have more as well if you want to dig deeper, but during an interview process once, I was interviewing somebody for an assistant role for our manager. And during the call, I said to her, I'm curious how much you know about our business. What is our ideal avatar? And she started rambling about technology. And it was honestly nonsense. And I said, wait, no, just clearly, directly, what is our client avatar? And she paused and she kept talking about technology. And I said, do you know what an avatar is? And she said, like the movie? Brother. I said, no, not like the movie, like our client avatar, our ideal client. That's an avatar. Now, here's the thing. I've liked everything you've said until this point. If you don't know something, admit that you don't know it. I don't expect you to know everything. If you said, I don't know what a client avatar is or an avatar is, can you explain that to me? I would say, sure, it's our ideal client. And if she kept going, maybe we would have hired her. But that displays a low level of social intelligence.
Yes.
Because she's trying to come up with some bullshit that she doesn't, excuse my French, that she doesn't know the actual answer to. Right? So social intelligence, actual intelligence, experience, and a very strong attitude. And one final thing, which I mention on every job interview, is how open are you to feedback? Because I know myself, I will admit that when it comes to my business, I'm a perfectionist. And I know exactly what I want. So if you're open to feedback and you don't take it the wrong way, this is going to work fine. That would be the final thing.
Yeah. I think those are such great points, man. I agree. Candidates trying to BS their way through an answer is one of the biggest red flags, because when you're being presented a candidate, they're going to try to show their absolute best face. And some people misunderstand this. Some people think that, oh, if they get a bit nervous or they don't know the answers to something, that's red flag. And I would say it's not. People get nervous in interviews, and that's not necessarily indicative of how they're going to perform in the position, because the position is not doing interviews every day.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just on that note, one of our key employees, probably the key employee, her name's Dan. She's our administrative manager. During our interview, she paused and then she said, I'm sorry, I'm just really nervous. And that made me smile. And I said, it's fine. No problem. Take all the time you need. We ended up hiring her. So you're
Yeah.
absolutely right.
Yeah, that's actually a green flag, isn't it? Being able to say like, hey, I'm nervous, or hey, sorry, I don't know the answer to this, and maybe I should have prepared better. That level of self-awareness and openness is such a green flag. And I think a lot of people might not be aware of it. I would love to hear a little bit more, man, about if you got other fun stories. It can be a horror story. It can also be maybe like a positive surprise or anything fun that you've experienced as you've been running this remote team.
I'll share a story of a mistake that I made. It's not so fun, but I believe it'll be very, very valuable for your listeners who are hiring or growing a team. One mistake that I'm so grateful that I made because I learned from it was a couple of months ago, we were looking for a high ticket closer, and somebody came along through a referral, which is usually a positive sign. I made the mistake of delegating maybe 80 or 90%. I would say 80% of our sales calls in the first month, watching the sales recordings, giving feedback, but they burnt through every single one of them. They signed up one client who recently disputed a payment, actually. So they weren't even a good client. Didn't show up to any of the trainings. So basically they closed nothing. That cost us, without exaggeration, if she had a 20% close rate, that cost us about $35,000 if she had a 20% close rate. So after that, I looked back and I was like, damn, we had a really poor month last month. And I take full responsibility for that. That's because I hired too quickly and I delegated too quickly as well. I believe in delegation. I'm really good at delegation, actually. I would say probably 80% of the operations, if not more, are delegated apart from the coaching side of things, which is really cool. But the sales side of things, you need to be more careful with that. So that was one mistake that I made.
Yeah. So what would you have done differently looking back now?
Well, the next time we hire a closer, I'm going to give them a couple of calls, maybe two to four calls per week, train them daily, which I was still doing, and slowly give them more calls, slowly give them more crucial tasks, even if they're not a closer, slowly build up their to-do list as they continue to prove themselves, not just give total trust from the get-go. Here's everything you need to do, go for it, especially if it's a critical task, which is a money-making activity that produces revenue. I'm going to be much slower in delegating that. That's what I would do differently.
So what do you think she was doing wrong? What was that mistake because you did say you were monitoring her very closely. I'm curious, what was the mistake that slipped through?
It was an inability to implement feedback, and the sales skill was not anywhere near what was pitched. So her sales ability it just wasn't what she was selling. So that's why I'm also a bit more skeptical now. When somebody, for example, we're hiring setters now, appointment setters. Even if somebody's perfect, I've interviewed two already. I said, cool, after the interview, I'm going to text you later. I want to do a role play. Yes. Those two great interviews, when we did the role play, shocking grammatical errors, misspelling, this and that. I was like, all right, therefore I'm going to test to see if they actually have the skills. So in that case of the closer, it was an inability to actually implement the feedback that I was giving. She wouldn't do that. And the sales skill simply wasn't there.
I hear you, man. That's one of the things that we actually believe in very strongly at Paired is that the assessment is should be the number one factor in your hiring decision. So, interview is great, but again, people can get nervous, etc. And like we said, I think looking out for that, just the kind of culture, the kind of vibe your business has, and that level of awareness that you want, looking out for that is very important. But the most important thing above all is an assessment. So you're right. If it's a chat-based role, have a chat with them or multiple ones and have a chat with them. And if they do better than a 7 out of 10, give them some feedback and have another chat with them the next day and see if they can hit that 9 or 10 out of 10.
That's really good. I like that.
Yeah, right. And I think it's the same with sales. Definitely you want to role play with them. And then maybe even before officially hiring them, give them a couple calls that you think I wouldn't even give them the worst leads that you have in your pipeline, right? Give them some that you think are actually an easy close and see if they're able to come close to a close or actually close. And that assessment is always going to be the best way to determine whether they're the right fit or not. I've seen actually the two guys that are, I think, working at your business now are actually people that I think I recommended. So I actually helped you hire a couple of people.
Yeah.
Which I'm
which I'm so grateful for.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I think they got a great place to work. They're really good guys. And one of them, Christian, for example, when I worked with him, he came into a position in my previous business that he'd never done before. Like he had, he was completely new to it. But I did a quick trial. I did like an assessment with him and I just kind of threw him into the deep water to see how he reacts. And then just that basic like intelligence and personality fit just showed itself immediately.
Okay.
It was super obvious. And I think that's what people really need to look for rather than, do you have some fancy companies in your resume or do you have 5 years experience? Because like at the end,
I don't look at resumes.
really? You don't,
Yeah.
you're one of the no resume people?
Yeah, I don't care. You could write anything. It doesn't matter to me.
That's true, isn't it? Yeah, it's totally true. And I think even people talk about references like, yeah, you can write everything, but what about I think if you're a proper recruiter, like we have recruiters on our team, or like private investigators, like they will go in and they will find out, right? They will investigate. But as a founder, you probably don't have the time. You're just going to call the number that's on there or send an email. And for all you know, that can be like their buddy from college, right? Like you don't really know what you're getting unless you have the time to investigate.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, man. So I'm very curious to hear how you actually manage this team of 8 people, different time zones, different cultures. What's your approach? Do you guys have like team meetings every week? Are you more of a, are you a micromanager? Do you just let them take the wheel and take ownership? What's your approach?
It's a good question. So the easiest way that I've found to keep an eye on everybody without having to, micromanage was by opening different group chats and compartmentalizing everything in the business. That's one of the best things we've done. So for example, we have a group chat on Telegram for marketing, which includes the video editor. It includes the social media manager, who's my wife. It includes Dan, our assistant and / admin manager, who looks over everything. It includes our copywriter. So anytime there's a question there, for example, the copywriter or the video editor has a question or they need feedback, they pop it in the group chat and either our social media manager or our admin manager checks it and gives them feedback before I do. If I'm online and I see the message or if it's something I feel like I should answer, I'll answer, but very often I don't even answer because they take care of it. Same thing with setting. We have an appointment setting group chat. Chris pretty much answers most questions there. Our manager's there as well. So everything is self-sufficient, but the thing that helped me delegate and take my hands off and free up my time as much as possible was promoting Dan, who was my assistant, to admin manager. And when I did that, obviously I gave her a pay rise and I told her, now you're getting paid more, but you also have more responsibility. Now you need to, because you know my style, you know how I like content to be, you know my editing style, you know how I communicate. So when people, the rest of the team members ask a question in the group chats, you stay on top of it and she checks it. So delegating that to her plus my wife, the social media manager, those are 2 people already who are looking over everything, and Chris as well for the setting side of things. So that's how we do it. And every week we just have 2 team meetings on Mondays, which is a setting team meeting for appointment setting and a marketing team meeting just to see what content we have lined up for the week, podcast, YouTube, Instagram, etc. And apart from that, we don't do anything else. Once I hire a closer, I'll probably have daily meetings with them until they become very self-sufficient. But right now, that's all. That's all. Just 1 meeting per week plus the group chats.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool to understand. And I think when I look at companies that are very successful with delegating, and this actually applies to Paired as well, they always have this like star player. You want to have a team of 8 players, of course, like you want everyone to be going beyond your expectations ideally. But then you have like a core team member where it's not the founder that people go to when there's problems. It's one of the worst positions to put yourself in when you're a founder, is to be putting out everyone's fires. It's really the worst. I think it's much better to have a core team member who could be like head of operations, or I think the title your person has, you said it was admin manager, who's like, it's kind of like the founder sets the tone, right? The founder is like, hey, these are our standards. This is how we roll. But, I'm the visionary, right? I don't have time to be caught up in operations every day. But hey, here's the operations person. They get the vision, they get the standards, they embody it. And so everyone can go to them with their problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And I think that's like, a lot of people might not even be comfortable with that. I'm curious, did you have any holdups when sort of like handing that power, quote unquote, over to that person?
Yeah, and that authority, maybe another word.
Exactly.
I believe one of my biggest strengths that I've discovered over the past year is delegating, and that's simply for the reason that I'm lazy.
Yeah, same here, man. Same here.
Swear to God, that's why. So when I delegated first to Dan, I gave her so much because I trusted her so much because she proved herself. I let her do her thing. Their plans, they make decisions. And so it wasn't difficult for me. In fact, I cannot wait for the day that I hire a CEO. Because that's when I am completely removed from the business, apart from two tasks, which I love: content creation and coaching executive clients. If I get to a point, not if, when I get to a point where the only thing I'm doing is going on podcasts, recording content, and coaching clients, and that's all I'm doing, that is the ideal situation that I'm aiming for over the next, I would say, maybe year and a half, 2 years. Yeah, at this point, I'm still heavily involved. I'm still going to the team meetings. I'm still looking at emails every now and then, doing operations, posting every now and then from my end just because I want the music right. But once I remove myself completely and I hire a CEO to look over the whole company, and I've seen a trend, by the way, people think that it's only large organizations and corporate environments that need CEOs and chiefs, C-suites. But I've noticed a pattern from many of my entrepreneurial friends here in Dubai who are ultra successful, who have coaching businesses, who have consulting businesses, and also they're in tech maybe. Many of them have delegated pretty much everything to a CEO. And at that point, they can even retire if they wanted to. That'll
Yeah.
be near impossible for my industry because obviously I'm the face of the business and I don't want to retire. But it's the closest thing to retirement when you can literally just remove everything and delegate. So that would be the next step.
100%, man. What are some qualities that you would look for in that CEO that, we've covered a bunch, but maybe we haven't? That's like a very high level position, right? So I'm curious, what would you look for in that person?
I know a lot of people don't like this word, but I believe those who operate at a very, very high level have this quality, and that's perfectionism. In fact, that's how Dan got promoted to manager. It was by her being a perfectionist. She would say, for example, I would notice her give feedback to employees before she was manager saying, I don't like the way that's written, or I don't like the color here. It's slightly too dark, slightly too warm, etc. I was like, yeah, that's the kind of quality you look for in a leader. So somebody who's a perfectionist, somebody that knows how to communicate, somebody that takes full responsibility and just makes the company their baby, which is what Dan has done. And I wouldn't be surprised if she ends up being CEO in the future, going from assistant all the way to CEO.
Yeah.
But somebody that just makes it their baby and is not afraid to hop on the phone or send an email at 11 p.m. on a Sunday. Somebody who becomes an intrapreneur, which I'm sure you've heard of that term. Somebody that's basically an entrepreneur, but inside an organization. And of
Absolutely.
course, because our niche is communication, which is a section of personal development, I would say, they would need to see the value and be aligned with the value that we have of actually changing lives and doing this because we have an impact on the world. So they would need to be bought in to the vision as well.
Yeah, that makes total sense, man. Yeah. So if I'm more of an entrepreneur at the moment, but if I was running my completely independent business right now, like I did in the past, one of my concerns with bringing on a CEO, and maybe this is just me, would be how do I give this person a fair compensation and still leave enough for the company and myself, right? Because I guess one of the benefits of being a founder is that you have so much leverage, right? As long as your cash flow is healthy, as long as your cash reserves are healthy, you have so much leverage, right? You are a little bit like you are the business, right? But I would imagine as soon as you bring a CEO on board, their compensation is going to be the highest of the entire team. And then so it's quite a bit of a sacrifice where like you're going to have to spend a lot of your cash in this one position and you get a lot of freedom in exchange, right? A lot of mental space, but you will probably have to give up quite a lot.
Yeah, allow me to push back on that because I do disagree with that approach, that mindset towards it, because I don't see it as giving up anything. I don't see it as sacrificing. I see every ideal employee, including a CEO, as nothing more than an investment. Because, for example, the way that I see it is I am thinking so big to the point where once we hire a CEO, their compensation is going to be a very small percentage of the profits and income that we make by the end of the year. So it would be multi seven figures at that point. And at that
Mm.
point, if you're paying somebody 100 to 150K per year USD, to me, that's an investment that I'm
For
more than
sure.
happy to do.
That's a really good point, man. And that's funny because again, like when I think of CEO and I'm thinking like US salaries or, UK salaries or any like, kind of like big developed business hub countries in the world, like a lower six-figure salary usually doesn't cut it, right? Like a CEO will expect 3 to 500K if they're running like a big organization or not even like a medium to big organization. And that's the other thing about hiring remotely is that like you can get someone who will be totally happy with 100, 150K USD a month because they're living in a place where, that allows you to live like an absolute king. Like you live like the person is living on 500K in New York or LA, you're living like that, but you're in, I don't know, Montenegro or something. I have no idea. Right.
Yeah.
And that's like, it still boggles my mind sometimes that like, it's such a win-win. It's a win for your business because you're cutting red tape. You're bringing in amazing talent at a much cheaper price. It's a massive win for the person because, they're living in a country with a much lower cost of living and they have an awesome remote, like they're working from their laptop earnings. In this case would be like six figures. Amazing. And you're not liable for all this stuff like social security and I think a lot of these regulations are reasonable, but let's be honest, in most Western countries, there's just a lot of red tape. It's so hard to hire. And so it still boggles my mind what a business hack this is to do a position like a head of ops or a CFO or a CEO abroad. I think it's like, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's one of the greatest opportunities there is now. I mean, we both work remote and you can work around your schedule. You can, sometimes I tell my team, the ones that don't have specific deadlines in the day, I tell them, I don't mind how many hours you work as long as you get the job done. So
Yeah.
being able to take, but let's say you are working from 9 to 5 and you're remote and you're working at mind's eye status, you can take that laptop and go to a cafe. You can take that laptop, go to the beach. You can take that laptop and go to Thailand and still get the job done. And that's one of the beauties of having that location freedom. This is a dream that many people had before COVID, especially. And one of the blessings of COVID was people realized, we can actually do most of our work remotely. And that's why we have so many 6, 7, 8, even 9-figure businesses that are completely remote. It's an opportunity.
Totally. I think some of the biggest market leaders in the world now are fully remote because it's also a way to attract amazing talent. I'll be honest, with the contracts, with the job that I have at Pair now, these different opportunities. If I wasn't able to do it remotely, if I had to come into a physical office, it'll be a totally different deal. Now I work from home. I just had a baby 2 months ago. And the fact that I can put in my 6, 8 hours a day in flexible, different chunks, right? I can go out for a walk. I can go to the gym. I can help my wife and look after the baby a little bit, or not even just hang out with the baby and her when, I have a little gap and manage my own time. Sometimes I catch myself taking it for granted, but then I realize like this is a huge, huge privilege, a massive perk. And I really think it's the future. Like I really see the trend that I see in the job market right now is that I think everyone is going to be like a mini entrepreneur or intrapreneur. This is already happening. People look at your LinkedIn before they look at your resume. And if on your LinkedIn, you treat yourself like a mini business, people will love that.
It's a personal brand.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone will need to have a personal brand, period. Companies will basically need to compete for the right entrepreneurs to come into your organization, right? And yeah, I'm really excited about that future. And I'm not really afraid of AI, taking over and taking away. No, I think it's just going to enhance and change the job market. But in general, I think it's going to be a lot more remote, decentralized, and more free, independent, fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And people who are against AI, for example, interesting subject. It's the same attitude people had towards social media or towards the internet, saying, it's evil, Y2K, this and that is going to happen. It's like, it's happening. You're not going to stop it. So you better learn how to use it at least.
Exactly, man. Tractors put, the horses and bulls out of jobs that were plying the fields. The printing press put the monks out of their, hand scribble textbook jobs. It's unstoppable. It's going to happen. I mean, it is happening. Like I'm sure you do too. I use AI in my work daily,
Yeah, of
like multiple
course.
times a day. And it's a total blessing. So
Absolutely.
Shako, I really loved our chat, man. To wrap up, I'm curious, what's next for you and your team? What's coming up that you're excited about?
I appreciate you asking, man. And it's just expansion in all ways. So we have a good team working organically on Instagram now. We recently launched ads, and we have a great coach in the program, Coach Daniel as well, who you referred to us as well, which has been incredible. He's a great coach, and I just want to give him and myself bring in more clients to help, because we have capacity for it. And that's what happens when you work remote as well. You can work with more people. And next step is just expanding the team with more setters, more closers. And another thing, actually a big one that I'm focusing on a lot, is YouTube these days. So that's starting to pick up over the past few weeks. And I love the idea of, that's one thing I'll never delegate. I say that now. Pulling out my whiteboard, turning on the camera, and just talking about what I'm passionate about. So expanding my YouTube is another big next thing for us.
Well, I hope, and I am actually sure that you guys are going to crush it. And for the founders listening, if you're looking to outsource, delegate, build your own remote team, that's exactly what we do at Paired Recruiting. You can check out candidates that we have in store for you without any big commitment down, and you don't pay unless we get someone successfully placed for your business. So check us out. And Shako, where can people check your work out?
Easiest place would be Shako T Lokman on Instagram, and same thing on YouTube.
Love it. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Really, really enjoyed this.
Thank you, brother. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.